The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a desperate scream. On the bridge of the galactic peacekeeping vessel Harmony's Edge, Captain Zethkara's 4 eyes narrowed as she studied the distress signal emanating from the remote mining station of Kepler 442c. The signal carried the unmistakable signature of a code black situation. Hostile alien contact with extreme prejudice. Analysis, Commander, Zethkara commanded, her scaled fingers drumming against the command chair's armrest. The Decian captain had seen her share of conflicts across the galaxy's outer rim, but something about this particular distress call made her gill slits flutter with unease. Commander Voss, a towering Kralian whose crystalline exoskeleton caught the bridge's blue lighting, manipulated the holographic display with practiced efficiency. Captain, the mining station reports contact with an unknown species calling themselves the Pack. Initial communications suggest they're demanding complete surrender of all valuable resources and threatening total annihilation of the human colonists if their demands aren't met. The word human caused a ripple of concerned murmurs across the bridge. Humans were relatively new to galactic society, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 standard years ago. Most species still consider them primitive, barely evolved beyond their planet-bound origins. The thought of them facing a hostile first contact situation alone sent chills through the assembled crew. Time to intercept? Zethkara asked, already knowing the answer would be grim. 17 hours at maximum burn, Captain. But, according to the transmission timestamps, the Pack has given the colonists only 12 hours to comply before they begin harvesting operations. Zethkara's secondary arms clenched involuntarily. Harvesting was a term used by the worst kind of predatory species, those who didn't just kill for resources, but who took pleasure in the process itself. She'd encountered such creatures before, and the memories still haunted her sleep cycles. Signal all available peacekeeping vessels in the sector. Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. We need every ship we can get. Captain, interrupted Lieutenant Morty from the communication station, her tentacles dancing over the controls with nervous energy. I'm receiving responses now. The stalwart defender can reach the system in 14 hours. The Void's edge is 16 hours out. But, Captain, none of us will arrive before the Pack's deadline. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Zethkara stared at the tactical display, showing the positions of various peacekeeping ships, all of them too far away, all of them arriving too late to prevent whatever horror the Pack had planned for the human colonists. What do we know about this mining station? She asked finally. Commander Voss pulled up the relevant data. Kepler, 442c, Outer Rim territory. Primary mining operation focused on rare earth elements and quantum crystals. Population approximately 8,000, mostly human civilians with a small contingent of various species serving as technical advisors. The station has minimal defensive capabilities, standard mining laser arrays that could be adapted for combat, but nothing that could stand against a coordinated military assault. 8,000 souls, Zethkara whispered. In her career, she'd seen entire worlds fall to hostile species, but somehow the thought of 8,000 beings, most of them the galaxy's newest sentient members, facing annihilation felt particularly tragic. Captain, I'm picking up another transmission from the Kepler system, Lieutenant Moritich announced, her voice carrying a note of confusion. It's not from the mining station. The Pack. No, Captain. It's from a civilian cargo hauler. Registration shows it's a human vessel, the Murphy's Law, single occupant, heading directly for the mining station. Zethkara's primary eyes met her secondary ones in the reflection of her command screen, a Decian expression of complete bewilderment. A single human ship heading toward a hostile alien fleet. Yes, Captain. The vessel appears to be an old human freighter, modified for long-haul cargo runs. According to the registration data, it's operated by one Marcus Chun, listed as an independent mechanical contractor. A mechanic? Commander Voss's voice carried the same disbelief that Zethkara felt. A single human mechanic is flying toward what might be the most dangerous first contact situation in recent galactic history. Transmit on all frequencies, Zethkara ordered. Warn that vessel about the situation. Tell them to maintain safe distance, and wait for peacekeeping forces to arrive. Lieutenant Moritich's tentacles worked frantically over her console before she looked up with an expression of confusion. Captain, I've sent the warning. The human vessel acknowledged the transmission, but their response was somewhat unusual. How so? The pilot, Marcus Chun, thanked us for the information and said, and I quote, "Don't worry about me, I've got lunch covered." These folks are probably hungry by now. The bridge crew exchanged glances that ranged from confused to concerned. Commander Voss was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "Captain, perhaps this human doesn't understand the severity of the situation. Their species is still relatively new to space travel. They might not comprehend what they're flying into." Zitkara nodded slowly. It was a reasonable explanation. Humans were known for their optimism and their tendency to underestimate dangerous situations, traits that had served them well in their rapid expansion across the galaxy, but which could prove fatal in a situation like this. Continue monitoring all frequencies. If the pack makes any additional threats, I want to know immediately. And keep tracking the human vessel. The moment things go wrong, we may need to mount a rescue operation. The hours that followed were tense. The Harmony's Edge pushed its engines past recommended limits, but space was vast and distances unforgiving. Regular updates came from the mining station, each one painting a grimmer picture of the situation. The pack, it turned out, consisted of 3 massive warships of unknown design. Their technology seemed to be a hybrid of biological and mechanical systems, with hulls that appeared to shift and adapt like living tissue. Long-range sensors indicated each vessel was easily 3 times the size of the largest peacekeeping ships, and their energy signatures suggested weapons capabilities far beyond anything in the current galactic military arsenal. More disturbing were the communications intercepts. The pack spoke in a harsh, guttural language that the translation matrices struggled to interpret, but the general intent was clear enough. They viewed the humans not just as prey, but as a delicacy to be savored. Their deadline wasn't arbitrary. It was part of some ritualistic hunting behavior that required their victims to experience terror before the final strike. "Captain," Commander Voss announced during the 8th hour of their journey, "long-range sensors are detecting the human cargo vessel approaching the Kepler system. Estimated time to arrival at the mining station, 47 minutes. And the pack's deadline? 3 hours, 23 minutes. Zefkara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The human mechanic would arrive hours before any peacekeeping forces, walking directly into what was essentially a death trap. She'd seen the aftermath of pack-type predator attacks before. They didn't just kill quickly. They played with their prey. Any response to our warnings? The human continues to acknowledge our transmissions, Captain, but his responses remain unusual. His last message was asking if anyone knew whether the mining station had adequate cooking facilities. Cooking facilities? Zefkara repeated, wondering if the translation matrix was malfunctioning. Yes, Captain. He seems to be concerned about food preparation. The absurdity of the situation was almost overwhelming. Here was a human flying alone toward 3 massive alien warships, and he was worried about kitchen equipment. Either Marcus Chun was suffering from some form of psychological break, or humans were even stranger than the galaxy had previously believed. "Captain," Lieutenant Moritiage called out, her voice tight with tension. "I'm receiving a transmission from the pack. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with a sound that was part growl, part mechanical whine. The translation came through moments later, rendered in the flat, emotionless tone of the ship's computer. "Attention, soft-flesh creatures of the mining colony. You have ignored our generous deadline. We arrive in 3 of your hours to begin the harvest. Your fear will season our feast. Your desperation will provide entertainment. Prepare to die slowly." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Zefkara closed all 4 eyes, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. 8,000 lives, and she was still 9 hours away from being able to help. "Captain," Commander Voss said quietly, "the human vessel is now entering the Kepler system's outer boundary. They'll be within visual range of the pack ships in approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes for one lone human to somehow survive an encounter with 3 ships full of predatory aliens who treated sentient beings like livestock. The mathematics of survival weren't encouraging. Continue monitoring, and prepare a full tactical analysis for when we arrive. If that human somehow survives the next few hours, we're going to need every advantage we can get when we face the pack ourselves." But even as she gave the orders, Zefkara couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something unprecedented. No species in galactic history had ever faced the pack alone and lived to tell about it. Most encounters resulted in total annihilation with barely enough survivors to report what had happened. Yet here was Marcus Chun, independent mechanical contractor, flying towards certain death with apparent concerns about lunch preparation. Either he was the galaxy's most tragically optimistic being, or humans possessed something that the rest of the galaxy had severely underestimated. Time would tell which interpretation was correct, but Zefkara found herself hoping against hope that it would be the latter. The galaxy had enough tragedies. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for a miracle. The countdown continued, each passing minute bringing them closer to what would either be a rescue mission or a recovery operation. In the depths of space, the Murphy's Law continued its steady approach toward the mining station, carrying with it either the galaxy's bravest fool or its most dangerous surprise. 23 hours until the peacekeeping fleet arrived. 3 hours until the pack's deadline. And, somewhere in between, a single human with a cargo hold full of questions about cooking facilities was about to make first contact with the galaxy's most feared predators. The universe, Zefkara reflected, had a peculiar sense of timing. Marcus Chun took another sip of coffee from his thermal mug and studied the tactical display showing 3 massive alien ships positioned around Kepler 442C mining station like hungry predators circling wounded prey. The Murphy's Law was an old cargo hauler, built for reliability rather than speed or combat, but she carried him safely through 40 years of space trucking. Her sensors might not be military grade, but they were good enough to show him exactly what he was flying into. "Well, Murphy," he said to the ship's AI, a simple navigational program he'd named after his vessel. "Looks like we've got ourselves a situation." The AI responded in its pleasant, gender-neutral voice. "Marcus, long-range sensors indicate 3 unidentified vessels of significant size maintaining orbital positions around our destination. Their energy signatures suggest hostile intent. Recommendation: maintain safe distance and request assistance from authorities." Marcus chuckled and adjusted his worn baseball cap, a relic from Earth that he'd somehow managed to keep through 4 decades of space travel. "Murphy, my friend, those folks down there don't have time to wait for the authorities. Besides, looks like these visitors haven't had a proper meal in a while." He pulled up the cargo manifest on his secondary screen. The Murphy's Law wasn't carrying her usual load of machinery parts and rare earth processing equipment. Instead, her holds were filled with something far more valuable to a remote mining colony: food. Real food, not the synthesized protein blocks that most spacers subsisted on. Fresh vegetables grown in the hydroponic farms of New Eden. Actual beef from cattle raised on the grasslands of Terra Nova. Spices, coffee beans, chocolate, and 1,000 other delicacies that made life worth living when you were millions of light years from home. It was supposed to be a routine delivery, timed to arrive just before the harvest festival that the colonists held every standard year. "Murphy, open a channel to the mining station. Let them know we're here." "Channel open, Marcus." "Kepler, 442C mining station. This is Marcus Chun aboard the Murphy's Law. I've got your food delivery here, but it looks like you folks have some unexpected dinner guests. How are you holding up down there?" The response came quickly, and Marcus could hear the strain in the voice of whoever was speaking. Murphy's Law. This is Administrator Sarah Kim. "Marcus, you need to get out of here right now. We have 3 hostile alien vessels demanding our surrender. They're not here for negotiation. I heard about that from some peacekeeping ships on their way here. They also mentioned something about these visitors calling themselves the Pack. Any idea what they want besides surrender?" There was a pause before Sarah's voice came back, quieter and more frightened. "Marcus, they're not just demanding surrender. They're talking about harvesting us. For food. You need to leave now, before they notice you." Marcus set down his coffee and leaned back in his pilot's chair, considering the situation. He'd been hauling cargo through the outer rim for most of his adult life, and he'd encountered a share of dangerous situations. Pirates, system failures, navigational hazards that could turn a routine run into a life-or-death struggle. But he'd never faced anything quite like this. "Sarah, how many people you got down there?" 8,000, give or take." "Marcus, please, just get out of here. We've already sent distress calls. Help is coming." "Yeah, I know, but help's about 20 hours away, and from what I'm hearing, these Pack folks aren't that patient." Marcus studied the alien ships on his display, noting their positions and what little he could discern about their capabilities. Tell me about these ships. What are they doing exactly? They're just sitting there, waiting. They broadcast another message an hour ago, saying they were going to begin harvesting operations in a few hours. Marcus, whatever you're thinking, don't. There are 3 of them, and they're massive. Marcus pulled up the sensor data on the alien vessels. Sarah wasn't exaggerating. Each ship was easily the size of a peacekeeping cruiser, and their energy signatures suggested weapons that could reduce the mining station to atoms in minutes. But there was something else in the sensor readings, something that tickled the back of his mind with its familiarity. Murphy, run a spectral analysis on those ship hulls. Something about them seems off. The AI processed the request for several seconds before responding. Analysis complete. Marcus, the alien vessel hulls appear to be constructed of a hybrid organic metallic compound. The material shows characteristics consistent with both manufactured alloy and biological tissue. Biological tissue? Marcus frowned, pulling up more detailed sensor data. You mean like living ships? Partial biological integration confirmed. The vessels appear to be symbiotic constructions, combining artificial components with living organisms. That explained the odd energy signatures Marcus had been seeing. But it also suggested something else, something that made him smile for the first time since entering the system. Sarah, I need you to patch me through to these pack fellows. I want to have a little chat with them. Marcus, no. They'll detect your ship. They already know I'm here, Sarah. Ships that size have sensor arrays that could spot a coffee cup from 3-star systems away. The question is whether they consider one old cargo hauler worth bothering with. Marcus opened a general communication channel and transmitted on the frequencies the pack had been using. Attention pack vessels. This is Marcus Chun aboard the independent cargo hauler Murphy's Law. I understand you folks are having some kind of disagreement with the mining station. Thought maybe we could talk about it. The response was immediate and, thanks to the translation matrix, terrifyingly clear. The voice that came through the speakers was a mixture of growls, clicks, and mechanical grinding that somehow conveyed intelligence, malevolence, and hunger all at once. Small prey ship, you dare address the pack directly? You will join the harvest. Your flesh will season our feast. Well, that's not very neighborly, Marcus replied, adjusting his cap and taking another sip of coffee. Listen, I appreciate the invitation, but I've got a better idea. How about I invite you folks over for lunch instead? There was a long pause before the alien voice returned, carrying what sounded like confusion mixed with amusement. The tiny prey offers itself as meal? This is unexpected. Explain. Marcus pulled up his cargo manifest and grinned. 40 years of talking his way out of trouble were about to be put to the ultimate test. See, the thing is, you folks are looking at this all wrong. You've got 8,000 people down there, sure, but they're mostly humans who've been living on mining rations and recycled protein for months. That's not going to give you the kind of quality meal you're looking for. Quality meal? The alien voice now carried definite interest. Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to all the trouble of traveling out here to the middle of nowhere, you want something special, right? Something with flavor, with complexity, with proper seasoning and preparation. Marcus could almost hear the alien's confusion through the communication system. Explain this proper preparation, small prey. Well, that's where I come in. See, I'm not just any cargo hauler. I'm carrying the finest food supplies in 3 sectors. Fresh meat, real vegetables, exotic spices, ingredients that could turn any meal into a feast fit for, well, for a pack of sophisticated predators like yourselves. There was another long pause. When the alien voice returned, it carried a note that Marcus couldn't quite identify. You offer to cook for the pack. I'm offering to provide you with a dining experience unlike anything you've ever had. But there's a catch. Speak. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, knowing that the next few words would determine whether his gamble paid off or whether he'd just signed his own death warrant. The thing about proper cooking is that it takes time. You can't rush quality. If you want a meal that's truly worthy of beings as powerful as yourselves, you need to let a master work his craft. And I happen to be one of the best cooks this side of the galactic core. The small prey claims to be a food preparer. Marcus Chun, independent contractor, certified ship mechanic, and winner of the Outer Rim Chili Cook-Off 7 years running. Marcus said with completely unjustified confidence. I've got ingredients in my cargo hold that most beings never even dream of tasting. Another pause, this one longer. Marcus could imagine the aliens conferring among themselves, trying to decide whether this human was incredibly brave, completely insane, or something else entirely. The pack does not understand. You offer to prepare food for us instead of fleeing like sensible prey. I'm offering to prepare the best meal you've ever had, using ingredients and techniques that will make whatever you were planning with those colonists look like amateur hour. Marcus took a deep breath. But, like I said, quality takes time. And it takes the right environment. What environment? Well, for starters, I need to dock with the mining station. Their facilities are much better equipped for large-scale food preparation than anything I've got on my little ship. And I need my ingredients, which means you'd have to let me unload my cargo safely. Marcus could practically feel the alien confusion through the communication link. Here was a situation they'd probably never encountered before. Prey offering to cook for its predators. How long would this preparation require? Marcus did some quick mental calculations. The peacekeeping fleet was still 19 hours away. He needed to buy time, but not so much time that the aliens became suspicious. For a meal truly worthy of the pack, I need at least 15 hours. Maybe 20, depending on how elaborate you want the presentation to be. 15 hours. The alien voice carried a note of consideration. And during this time, the mining colony would be untouched. Well, sure, can't very well cook properly with people panicking all around, can we? Besides, some of the colonists are experienced food preparers themselves. I might need their help to create something truly spectacular. There was the longest pause yet. Marcus used the time to check his ship's systems and prepare for whatever response came next. Either he just bought 8,000 people nearly a full day of life, or he convinced a pack of hostile aliens to let him get close enough to become an appetizer. When the alien voice finally returned, it carried a new tone, one that Marcus couldn't quite identify, but that sent a chill down his spine. The pack accepts your proposal, small prey who calls himself cook. You will dock with the mining station. You will prepare this feast you promise. But know this, if you disappoint us, if your meal does not live up to your claims, the harvest will begin immediately, and you will be the first to feed us. Understood completely, Marcus replied, trying to keep the relief out of his voice. I guarantee you folks are in for the meal of a lifetime. As he maneuvered the Murphy's Law toward the mining station's docking bay, Marcus reflected on what he'd just committed himself to. He had 19 hours to somehow cook his way out of the most dangerous situation in galactic history. The funny thing was he actually did know how to cook. His ex-wife had taught him before the divorce, and decades of preparing his own meals in the cramped galley of a cargo ship had given him plenty of practice. But cooking for a pack of carnivorous aliens who treated sentient beings as livestock, that was going to require some creativity. The docking bay of Kepler 442C mining station buzzed with nervous energy as Marcus Chun guided the Murphy's Law through its final approach. Through the viewport, he could see dozens of colonists gathered behind the safety barriers, their faces a mixture of hope, confusion, and outright terror. It wasn't every day that their salvation potentially arrived in the form of a middle-aged cargo hauler with a questionable plan involving lunch. Administrator Sarah Kim was waiting at the airlock as Marcus cycled through the docking sequence. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of determined expression that suggested she'd been holding the colony together through sheer force of will. Marcus Chin, she asked as the airlock hissed open. Please tell me you have some kind of military background, and this isn't as crazy as it sounds. Marcus shouldered his tool bag and grinned. Sorry to disappoint you. 40 years hauling cargo, 10 years married to a woman who insisted I learn to cook, and about 5 minutes of thinking this whole thing through. But sometimes crazy is what works. Sarah's expression shifted from hope to something approaching panic. Marcus, there are 8,000 people on this station. 3 alien warships that could vaporize us without breaking a sweat. And your plan is to cook them lunch? My plan is to buy us time, Marcus corrected, walking past her into the station proper. The mining facility was larger than he'd expected, with corridors wide enough to accommodate heavy equipment and ceilings high enough to give the place an almost cathedral-like feeling. Those peacekeeping ships are still 18 hours out. The pack was planning to start their harvest in about 2 hours. Now, we got 15 to 20 hours, depending on how long I can stretch the cooking process. And then what? When the food is ready and they realize it's not what they expected. Marcus paused in the corridor, considering the question seriously. Well, that's where things get interesting. See, I've been thinking about those ships of theirs. My sensors picked up something unusual about their construction. He pulled out a portable datapad and showed Sarah the spectral analysis Murphy had run. Those ships aren't just vessels. They're symbiotic organisms. Part machine, part living creature. And you know what living creatures need? Food, Sarah said slowly. Exactly. But not just any food. The right kind of food. Nutrients, vitamins, minerals, trace elements that keep biological systems functioning properly. Marcus tapped the datapad with growing excitement. I'm willing to bet those ships haven't had proper maintenance in quite a while. They've been subsisting on whatever they could hunt, which probably means mostly protein and whatever random nutrients they could extract from their victims. Sarah stared at him as understanding began to dawn. You're not just planning to cook for them. You're planning to drug them. Not drug them, Marcus corrected. Feed them. But feed them exactly what their biological systems need to function properly. And if I'm right about how those ship organisms work, proper nutrition might just change their whole outlook on life. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's comm unit crackled to life. The harsh voice of the pack leader came through with its usual mixture of growls and mechanical sounds. Food preparer Marcus Chun, what is your status? Marcus keyed his comm, just getting settled in. I'm going to need access to the station's main kitchen facilities and permission to move my ingredients. This is going to be quite an operation. Proceed. The pack grows curious about this feast you promise. The channel closed, leaving Marcus and Sarah alone in the corridor. She looked at him with an expression that suggested she was still trying to decide whether he was brilliant or completely insane. All right, she said finally. What do you need? The next few hours transformed the mining station's cafeteria into something resembling a military operation. Marcus had Sarah organize teams to unload the Murphy's Law's cargo holds, which turned out to contain not just food, but also an impressive array of cooking equipment and ingredients that most people on the Outer Rim could only dream of. Fresh vegetables from the hydroponic farms of New Eden, tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes, peppers with enough heat to clear sinuses 3 systems away, herbs that filled the air with aromas that made hardened miners stop and stare in wonder. Real meat from Terra Nova. Beef that had spent its life grazing on actual grass under a real sun, not the lab-grown protein substitutes that most spacers had to settle for. And spices. Marcus had spices from across known space, collected during 4 decades of cargo runs to worlds that specialized in cuisine rather than industry. Saffron from the desert worlds of the Kepler system, vanilla from the tropical moons of Alpha Centauri, and a dozen other seasonings that could transform even the simplest meal into something extraordinary. But it was the conversation with Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief biologist, that really got Marcus excited. You're telling me those ships are partially organic? Dr. Vasquez asked as she studied the sensor data. She was a tall woman with graying hair and the kind of intense focus that came from years of scientific research. According to my ship sensors, yes. Hybrid constructions combining manufactured components with living organisms. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. That would explain some of the energy signatures we've been detecting. If the ships themselves are alive, or at least partially alive, they would have metabolic requirements. That's what I was thinking. And if they've been out here hunting and raiding for extended periods, they might not be getting proper nutrition. Malnutrition in symbiotic organisms can cause aggressive behavior, Dr. Vasquez mused. Stress responses, territorial aggression, reduced cognitive function. If these beings have been essentially starving their own ships, Marcus grinned as the pieces of his plan began falling into place. Then proper nutrition might just calm them down enough to actually negotiate instead of eating everyone in sight. The work began in earnest. Marcus found himself coordinating a cooking operation unlike anything he'd ever attempted. The mining station's cafeteria was designed to feed thousands of workers, but it wasn't equipped for the kind of complex preparation he had in mind. He had teams setting up additional cooking stations throughout the facility. Others were working on food preparation, cleaning vegetables, seasoning meats, and preparing the dozens of side dishes and accompaniments that would make up what Marcus hoped would be the most important meal in galactic history. But the real key to his plan lay in the supplements he'd brought along. Marcus had spent years collecting them during his cargo runs. Vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and trace elements that could provide complete nutrition for almost any carbon-based life form. Working with Dr. Vasquez, he began incorporating these supplements into the food in carefully calculated quantities. If his theory was correct, the meal he was preparing wouldn't just feed the pack. It would provide their symbiotic ships with nutrients they've been lacking for possibly years. Marcus, Sarah called from across the kitchen. We're getting another transmission from the pack. Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and activated his comm unit. Marcus Chin here. How can I help you folks? Food preparer. The pack grows impatient. When will this feast be ready? Well, you can't rush quality, Marcus replied, checking the progress at various cooking stations. But I can tell you that what we're preparing is going to be unlike anything you've ever experienced. I've got my best people working on preparations that will engage every aspect of your sensory experience. There was a pause before the alien voice returned, carrying a note of interest. Explain. Marcus had been hoping for this question. See, most beings just think about food as fuel. Protein, carbohydrates, basic nutrition. But true cuisine is about creating an experience that engages all the senses and provides exactly what the body needs for optimal function. He gestured to Dr. Vasquez, who began transmitting some of the nutritional data they'd compiled. We've analyzed the energy signatures from your ships and calculated the precise nutritional requirements for maintaining peak performance in hybrid biological mechanical systems. Another pause, this one longer. When the alien voice returned, it carried a note that Marcus had never heard before: uncertainty. The pack does not understand. You speak of maintaining our ships. Well, of course, your vessels are magnificent examples of biomechanical integration. But they're living systems, and living systems need proper nutrition to function at their best. When was the last time they received a complete nutritional profile instead of just random protein? The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. Marcus could imagine the aliens conferring among themselves, probably trying to figure out how this human had deduced something about their ships that they might not have considered themselves. The ships have not fed properly in many cycles, the alien voice admitted. We hunt when we must, take what nutrition we can find. But the ships grow restless. I bet they do, Marcus said sympathetically. Malnutrition can cause all kinds of problems. Aggression, poor decision-making, reduced efficiency. But the meal we're preparing will provide complete nutrition for both your crew and your ships. Think of it as maintenance, but maintenance that tastes incredible. Dr. Vasquez gave him a thumbs up from across the kitchen. The nutritional supplements were being integrated into every dish, carefully balanced to provide exactly what hybrid biomechanical systems would need for optimal health. The pack will consider this approach, the alien voice said finally. Continue your preparations. As the channel closed, Marcus felt a surge of hope. For the first time since this whole situation began, he had the feeling that his crazy plan might actually work. How are we doing with the main courses? He called out to his volunteer kitchen staff. Beef is marinating beautifully, replied James Park, one of the mining engineers who turned out to have impressive cooking skills. The spice blend you created is unlike anything I've ever seen. And the vegetables are responding perfectly to the mineral supplements, added Dr. Vasquez. If my calculations are correct, this meal will provide bioavailable nutrition that their ships haven't seen in years. Marcus looked around the bustling kitchen, at the dozens of colonists who'd volunteered to help with food preparation, at the massive quantities of food that would soon be feeding a pack of carnivorous aliens. 8 hours down, 10 to go before the peacekeeping fleet arrived. But for the first time since he'd entered the Kepler system, Marcus Chun was beginning to think they might all survive this. And if his theory was correct, the pack might just discover that there was something more satisfying than hunting and raiding. Sometimes the best solution to a problem wasn't fighting or running. Sometimes it was simply offering a good meal and treating potential enemies like guests who just hadn't eaten properly in a while. Time would tell if he was right, but Marcus had always believed that food could bring beings together. He was about to find out if that principle worked on a galactic scale. 12 hours into the longest cooking session of his life, Marcus Chun was discovering muscles he'd forgotten he had. The mining station's main cafeteria had been transformed into something that resembled a cross between a 5-star restaurant kitchen and a military field hospital, with dozens of colonists working in coordinated teams to prepare what might be the most important meal in galactic history. Marcus, we've got a problem, Dr. Vasquez called from her monitoring station, where she'd been tracking the energy signatures of the pack's ships. The biological components of their vessels are showing increased activity. It's almost like they can smell the food being prepared. Marcus paused in his seasoning of what had to be the largest pot roast in human history and walked over to examine the readings. The data showed fluctuating energy patterns in the alien ships that definitely suggested some kind of biological response. That's actually good news, he said after studying the patterns. If their ships are responding to food aromas, it means they're even more malnourished than I thought. A starving organism will react strongly to the prospect of proper nutrition. Sarah Kim appeared at his elbow, looking exhausted but determined. She'd been coordinating the volunteer teams for hours, making sure that everyone understood their role in what had become the most complex food service operation in the station's history. The alien communication just came through again, she reported. They're asking about timing, and they sound different. Different how? Less aggressive. More curious? It's hard to tell through the translation matrix, but there's definitely been a change in tone. Marcus nodded, wiping his hands on his apron before activating his comm unit. This is Marcus Chun. How can I help you folks? The response came immediately, but Sarah was right. There was something different about the alien voice. The mechanical growling was still there, but underneath there was a note that almost sounded like anticipation. Food preparer Marcus Chun. The ships report unusual sensations. Aromas that penetrate even the void barriers. What is this sensation? Marcus smiled, remembering his ex-wife's lessons about how cooking was as much about anticipation as it was about the actual eating. That's the aroma of proper nutrition, friends. Your ships are responding to the promise of nutrients they've been craving for longer than they probably remember. The ships speak to us of hunger we had not recognized. This is puzzling. Not puzzling at all, Marcus replied. When you've been surviving on inadequate nutrition for an extended period, your body forgets what proper nourishment feels like. But when it's presented with the real thing, instincts that have been suppressed for cycles suddenly reawaken. Dr. Vasquez handed him a datapad showing the latest nutritional analysis of the meal they were preparing. The numbers were impressive, a complete nutritional profile that would satisfy the requirements of almost any carbon-based life form, with special attention to the trace elements and enzymes that hybrid biological systems would need. We're preparing a feast that will provide your ships with nutrients they've probably never experienced, Marcus continued. Vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and trace elements that will help them function at peak efficiency. Think of it as the difference between surviving and thriving. There was another pause, longer this time. When the alien voice returned, it carried a note of something that Marcus could only describe as wonder. The pack has never considered thriving. We hunt. We survive. We take what we need and move on. This concept of nurturing the ships, this is unknown to us. Marcus felt a surge of excitement as his theory began to prove itself. These weren't just mindless predators. They were beings whose behavior had been shaped by the constant stress of malnutrition and survival. Change their nutritional status, and their entire worldview might change as well. Well, you're about to discover a whole new way of existing, he said. But I need to know, are you willing to come aboard the station for this meal? The presentation is an important part of the experience, and I think you'll find that eating in a proper environment enhances the nutritional benefits. The silence stretched on for so long that Marcus began to wonder if he'd pushed too hard. Then, the alien voice returned, carrying unmistakable uncertainty. The pack does not socialize with prey. We do not understand this concept. You're not socializing with prey, Marcus corrected gently. You're dining with fellow beings who want to share something extraordinary with you. There's a difference between hunting and hospitality. Another long pause. Marcus could imagine the aliens conferring among themselves, trying to process concepts that probably had no equivalent in their experience. The pack will consider this proposal. Continue preparations. As the channel closed, Marcus found himself surrounded by colonists who'd been listening to the conversation with expressions ranging from hope to sheer terror. Did you just invite them aboard the station? Asked James Park, the engineer who'd been helping with food preparation. I invited them to experience proper hospitality, Marcus corrected. There's a difference between dealing with ravenous predators and hosting guests who happen to be carnivorous. But, Marcus, Sarah interjected, if they come aboard and decide they don't like the meal, then we're no worse off than we would have been if I'd never shown up, Marcus replied. But if this works, if proper nutrition really can change their behavior, then we might be preventing conflicts across the entire galaxy. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her monitoring station with excitement in her eyes. Marcus, you need to see this. The energy signatures from their ships are stabilizing. Whatever they're experiencing, it's having a calming effect on their biological systems. The next few hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Marcus found himself fine-tuning seasonings, adjusting cooking times, and coordinating the presentation of what had to be the most important meal he'd ever prepared. The colonists had thrown themselves into the project with the dedication of people who understood that their lives literally depended on the quality of the food they were preparing. The beef had been slow-roasted to perfection, seasoned with a blend of spices that would provide essential nutrients while creating flavors unlike anything the pack had probably ever experienced. Vegetables had been prepared in ways that would maximize their nutritional value, while making them appealing even to strict carnivores. And throughout everything, Dr. Vasquez's carefully calculated supplements had been integrated to provide exactly what hybrid biological systems needed. When the communication came through 14 hours into the cooking process, Marcus was putting the finishing touches on what he privately considered his masterpiece, a sauce that combined flavors from a dozen different worlds with nutrients that could restore proper function to systems that had been malnourished for years. Food preparer Marcus Chun, the alien voice said, and the change in tone was unmistakable now. Where before there had been mechanical growling and threatening undertones, now there was something that almost sounded like anticipation. The ships insist that we experience this feast you have prepared. We will transport aboard your station. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm with enough force to leave bruises. They're actually coming aboard, she whispered. Marcus keyed his calm with steady hands. We'll be honored to host you. The meal is ready when you are. The docking bay had been cleared of everything except the tables Marcus had requested. He'd insisted on proper presentation, not just for the psychological effect on the pack, but because he genuinely believed that how food was served was as important as how it was prepared. 3 large tables had been set up, each one laden with dishes that represented the finest cooking Marcus and his volunteer staff could produce. The aroma alone was enough to make the colonists who'd helped with preparation stand and stare in wonder. When the alien delegation materialized in the docking bay, apparently their ships used some kind of advanced transporter technology. Marcus got his first look at the pack up close. They were larger than he'd expected, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with bodies that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements just like their ships. Their skin had a metallic sheen that shifted and flowed like living armor, and their faces combined features that were distinctly predatory with technological enhancements that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. But it was their eyes that caught his attention. Where he'd expected to see the cold calculation of apex predators, instead he saw something that looked almost like curiosity. The pack leader, distinguished by additional technological integration and scars that suggested countless battles, approached the tables with movements that were cautious rather than threatening. When he spoke, the translation came through clearly. Food preparer Marcus Chun. This is unexpected. We had anticipated simple sustenance. This appears to be art. Marcus smiled and gestured toward the feast they'd prepared. The two aren't mutually exclusive. When you take the time to prepare food properly, when you consider not just nutrition but presentation and flavor and the entire experience of eating, sustenance becomes something more. The pack leader bent closer to examine the dishes, and Marcus could see mechanical sensors extending from various parts of his body to analyze what was before him. The ships respond to these aromas with sensations we have not experienced in many cycles. They speak of nutrients, of completeness, of satisfaction. Marcus suggested. Yes, this concept of satisfaction, it is foreign to us. Marcus picked up a serving utensil and began portioning food onto plates that had been specially prepared for their guests. That's what happens when you've been in survival mode for so long that you forget there are other ways to exist. But your ships remember. Deep down, they remember what it feels like to be properly nourished. As he served the meal, Marcus watched the pack's reactions carefully. Their initial caution gave way to something approaching wonder as they experienced flavors and nutrients that their systems had been craving without their conscious knowledge. The pack leader took his first bite slowly, mechanically, as if he expected this to be just another feeding exercise. But as the food hit his system, his entire posture changed. The rigid tension that had characterized his movements began to relax, and when he looked up at Marcus, his expression was completely transformed. We have never. The ships sing with contentment we did not know was possible. Around the tables, the other pack members were having similar experiences. Decades, possibly centuries of nutritional stress were being addressed by a meal that provided exactly what their hybrid biological systems needed. Marcus felt a profound sense of satisfaction as he watched beings who had been shaped by starvation discover what it meant to be truly nourished. This was what cooking was really about. Not just feeding people, but providing them with exactly what they needed to be their best selves. In 6 hours, the peacekeeping fleet would arrive expecting to find a war zone. Instead, they would find something unprecedented, proof that sometimes the best way to solve a conflict was simply to offer a good meal and treat your enemies like guests who just hadn't eaten properly in far too long. Captain Zefkara stared at her sensor readings in complete disbelief. The Harmony's Edge had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, expecting to find either a devastating battle in progress or the aftermath of a massacre. Instead, her sensors were showing 3 massive alien vessels in stable orbit around the mining station, with no signs of weapons fire, no debris fields, and no indication of the slaughter that the pack was known for. "Commander Voss," she called, her 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Please confirm these readings. Are we looking at the same system where the pack was supposed to begin harvesting operations 8 hours ago?" Commander Voss manipulated the sensor controls with his crystalline fingers, running multiple scans before responding. "Confirmed, Captain. 3 pack vessels in stable orbit. The mining station appears to be intact and fully operational. I'm detecting this is unusual." "What's unusual, Commander?" "Captain, I'm picking up massive energy expenditure from the pack ships, but it's not weapons or defensive systems. It's biological functions, life support, metabolic processes, cellular repair. It's like their ships are undergoing some kind of regenerative process." Lieutenant Moritih looked up from her communication station, her tentacles moving in patterns that indicated extreme confusion. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the mining station. It's Administrator Sarah Kim, and she's inviting us to dock for lunch." Zefkara felt her gill slits flutter in what her species recognized as the physical manifestation of cognitive overload. In 40 years of peacekeeping service, she'd never encountered a situation that defied expectations quite this thoroughly. "Lieutenant, please repeat that transmission. The mining station administrator is inviting the peacekeeping fleet to dock and join what she describes as an ongoing cultural exchange and dining experience. She mentions that they have more than enough food for everyone, and that the pack would like to meet representatives of galactic law enforcement. The pack would like to meet us." Commander Voss's voice carried the same disbelief that Zefkara felt. "Captain, in recorded history, no one has ever met the pack and lived to file a report. They don't engage in cultural exchanges. They devour civilizations." Zefkara studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the other peacekeeping vessels that had arrived in the system. The Stalwart Defender and Void's Edge were maintaining safe distances, their crews probably as confused as her own. "Maintain defensive readiness, but approach the station slowly," she ordered. "Lieutenant Moritih, request detailed situation reports from the mining station. I want to know exactly what happened here." The response came quickly, and Lieutenant Moritih's expression grew even more bewildered as she relayed the message. "Captain, Administrator Kim reports that the situation was resolved by Marcus Chun, an independent cargo hauler who cooked dinner for the pack and their ships." "He cooked dinner," Zefkara repeated slowly, as if saying the words might make them make sense. "Yes, Captain. Apparently, the pack ships are partially biological constructs that were suffering from severe malnutrition. Mr. Chun prepared a meal that provided complete nutrition for both the alien crews and their vessels, resulting in what the administrator describes as a fundamental shift in their worldview." Commander Voss manipulated the sensor controls again, focusing on the pack vessels. "Captain, if I may, the energy signatures I'm detecting are consistent with biological systems undergoing rapid healing and regeneration. If these ships were indeed malnourished, proper nutrition could theoretically cause exactly this kind of metabolic response." Zefkara made a decision that went against every protocol in the peacekeeping handbook. "Take us to docking station 7, but keep weapons systems ready and maintain full shields until we have a better understanding of the situation." The mining station's docking bay was unlike anything Zefkara had ever seen. The entire space had been converted into what appeared to be an enormous dining hall, with tables and food preparation areas scattered throughout. The aroma that greeted her as she stepped off the Harmony's edge was extraordinary, complex, layered scents that spoke of culinary expertise far beyond anything she'd expected to find on a remote mining colony. Administrator Sarah Kim was waiting to greet them, along with a middle-aged human male wearing a stained apron and a baseball cap that had seen better days. "Captain Zethkura, thank you for coming," Sarah said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'd like you to meet Marcus Chun, the man who single-handedly prevented what could have been a galactic incident." Marcus stepped forward with a slight smile and the kind of relaxed confidence that Zethkara associated with beings who were completely comfortable with their place in the universe. "Captain, pleasure to meet you. Hope you folks are hungry, because we got quite a spread here." Zethkara looked around the docking bay, taking in the sight of 3 massive alien beings seated at tables laden with food, engaged in what appeared to be animated conversation with various colonists. The pack members looked completely different from the terrifying predators described in peacekeeping reports. Relaxed, engaged, almost sociable. "Mr. Chun," she said carefully, "perhaps you could explain exactly what happened here." Marcus gestured toward the tables where the pack was dining. "Well, it turns out these folks weren't really the monsters everyone thought they were. They were just hungry. Their ships are partially biological, and they'd been surviving on inadequate nutrition for so long that it was affecting their behavior. Inadequate nutrition caused them to become raiders and killers. Malnutrition can cause aggressive behavior in any species," Dr. Elena Vasquez interjected, approaching the group with a datapad in hand. "I'm the station's chief biologist, and I've been monitoring the metabolic changes in the pack's ships since they received proper nutrition. The transformation has been remarkable." She handed the datapad to Zethkura, who studied the biological readings with growing amazement. "These energy signatures indicate cellular regeneration at a rate that should be impossible, unless the systems have been operating at severely diminished capacity for an extended period," Dr. Vasquez confirmed. "Mr. Chen's meal didn't just feed them, it healed them. Decades of malnutrition reversed in a matter of hours." Zethkara looked across the bay at the pack leader, who was engaged in what appeared to be a philosophical discussion with one of the mining engineers about the relationship between nutrition and consciousness. The alien who had threatened to harvest 8,000 beings was now debating abstract concepts while savoring carefully prepared food. "May I speak with them?" she asked. Marcus nodded and led her across the bay to where the pack leader was seated. Up close, Zethkara could see the remarkable transformation Dr. Vasquez had described. The alien skin had a healthy metallic sheen instead of the dull, stressed appearance described in peacekeeping reports. His movements were fluid and relaxed rather than the rigid predatory stance that characterized malnourished behavior. "Pack leader," Marcus said, "I'd like you to meet Captain Zethkara of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force." The alien looked up from his meal, and Zethkara was surprised to see something that looked remarkably like embarrassment in his expression. "Captain Zethkara, I'm called Kethvar by my packmates. I must apologize for the threatening communications you received from us. We were not ourselves when those messages were sent. I don't understand." Kethvar gestured to the food before him, then to his packmates scattered around the bay. "We have spent so many cycles in survival mode that we have forgotten other ways of existence were possible. The ships whispered constantly of hunger, of need, of empty spaces that could never be filled. This drove us to take from others what we could not provide for ourselves. But now?" Zethkara asked. "Now the ships sing of contentment. The empty spaces are filled with nutrients we did not know we were lacking. And we discover that the universe contains possibilities we had never imagined." Kethvar looked directly at Zethkara, and she could see intelligence there that had been obscured by starvation stress. "We wish to learn more about these possibilities." Marcus pulled up a chair next to Kethvar's table. "What Kethvar and his people need isn't punishment or containment. They need education. They need to understand that there are ways to obtain nutrition and resources that don't involve raiding and harvesting." "You're suggesting that the pack become part of galactic civilization?" "I'm suggesting that they already are part of galactic civilization," Marcus replied. "They just need to learn new ways of participating in it." Over the next few hours, as more peacekeeping vessels arrived in the system, Zethkara found herself witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The pack, properly nourished for the first time in generations, revealed themselves to be not the mindless predators they'd been assumed to be, but sophisticated beings whose behavior had been shaped by chronic malnutrition and desperation. Kethvar and his packmates demonstrated knowledge of biomechanical engineering that surpassed anything in current galactic technology. Their ships, when properly nourished, were marvels of symbiotic design that could adapt to changing conditions in ways that conventional vessels couldn't match. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said as she approached with the latest biological readings, "I think we're looking at a revolution in how we understand the relationship between nutrition and behavior across species lines." How so? The pack's transformation isn't just physical, it's cognitive and emotional as well. Proper nutrition has restored brain function that had been suppressed by survival stress for generations. They're literally thinking more clearly than they have in cycles. Zethkara watched as Marcus Chun, cargo hauler, mechanic, and apparently amateur diplomat, explained the principles of trade and mutual benefit to beings who had only known taking by force. The pack listened with the intensity of students discovering fundamental truths about existence. "Mr. Chun," she said when she found a moment to speak with him privately, "do you realize what you've accomplished here?" Marcus adjusted his baseball cap and smiled. "I cooked lunch for some folks who were hungry. Nothing more complicated than that. You prevented a war. You transformed a species. You've changed the balance of power in this entire region of the galaxy. I made sure some living beings got the nutrition they needed," Marcus corrected. Everything else just followed naturally from that. As Zethkara prepared her report for Peacekeeping Command, she struggled to find words that could adequately describe what she'd witnessed. The official records would show that a potential galactic incident had been resolved through diplomatic intervention. But the reality was far more profound than that. A single human, armed with nothing more than cooking skills, and the insight that hunger could drive any being to desperate acts, had proven that sometimes the most complex problems had surprisingly simple solutions. The pack hadn't been conquered or contained or destroyed. They'd been fed, and in being properly nourished, they'd rediscovered who they were meant to be. Marcus Chun returned to his cargo runs, but his route now included regular supply deliveries to the pack's ships, ensuring that their biological systems remained properly nourished. The pack, for their part, became valuable contributors to galactic society, sharing their biomechanical expertise in exchange for the resources they needed to thrive rather than merely survive. And somewhere in the official archives of the Peacekeeping Force, there exists a report that future historians would study for generations. The first recorded instance of a galactic conflict being resolved not through superior firepower or diplomatic negotiations, but through the simple act of offering a good meal to those who needed it most. The universe, it turned out, was a friendlier place than anyone had imagined. Sometimes you just had to feed people properly to help them remember that fact.